Here is an extensive expansion of the narrative. This version delves significantly deeper into the atmospheric details, the psychological state of the participants, the intricate mechanics of the debate's turning points, and the sociological aftermath. It retains the core structure and facts of the source material while expanding the prose to meet your length and stylistic requirements. The Unseen Archive. The Dismantling of a Dynasty, Extended Edition. Part I. The Architecture of an Ambush. The definitive turning point of the broadcast materialized precisely 47 minutes into the program, cutting through the studio's carefully manicured tension like a guillotine blade slicing through still air. It was a singular fragment of time that historians, political analysts, and campaign strategists would eventually freeze, dissect, and examine for decades, identifying it as the exact instant a 4-decade political dynasty commenced its rapid and irreversible disintegration. Yet, to fully comprehend the sheer magnitude of the catastrophe that unfolded during that 47th minute, one must first grasp the immense weight of the expectations that had paved the way for it. This evening was never designed to be a debate in the traditional sense, nor was it envisioned as a contest between equals. In the minds of the media elite, the pundits, and certainly within the fortified inner circle of Nancy Pelosi's extensive staff, this night was choreographed to be a coronation. It was intended to serve as the final, triumphant lap of a career that had spanned nearly 40 years, a televised consecration of Nancy Pelosi as the unassailable matriarch of the American Republic. The narrative had been scripted long before the cameras began to roll. She was to rise above the turbulence of the opposing era, positioning herself not merely as a politician, but as the wise guardian of democracy, the definitive adult in the room, and the solitary voice of reason, standing firm against a rising tide of populism. For weeks leading up to the event, the preparation had been exhaustive, bordering on the theatrical in its intensity. Pelosi had secluded herself with her top aides, rehearsing every conceivable interaction to ensure nothing was left to chance. She had practiced her talking points until they flowed with the natural cadence of impromptu wisdom, even though every pause and vocal inflection was meticulously calculated. However, more than the words themselves, she had rigorously practiced the visual aspects of her performance. She spent hours before mirrors perfecting her facial expressions, specifically that signature, pitying smile for which she was famous. It was a look that communicated a profound sense of superiority, a silent message that seemed to say, "I possess so much more knowledge than you, you poor, uninformed soul." It was the very same expression she had weaponized during the State of the Union address years prior, where her sarcastic, outstretched applause had become a viral sensation, a meme that eventually adorned merchandise across the liberal landscape. That clap, and that specific look, represented the perfect synthesis of dismissiveness and aristocratic superiority, making her a hero to millions who believed that the ultimate victory in politics lay in making the opposition feel intellectually diminished. She entered the venue operating under the seductive delusion that she was walking into a friendly, 90-minute conversation. The event was branded as the State of Unity Town Hall, a title that practically dripped with the kind of focus group-tested optimism that fills press releases but rarely reflects the gritty reality of politics. The format was explicitly designed to favor her specific brand of managed diplomacy, with she and Donald Trump seated across from one another in comfortable, plush armchairs rather than standing behind rigid, confrontational podiums. A neutral moderator, James Reed, a man known for his gentle demeanor and reputation for fairness, would guide the discussion. The audience was carefully curated, split exactly 50-50 between Democrats and Republicans, verified by independent polling to ensure a perfect balance. It was a setting designed to strip away the raucous energy typically associated with a Trump rally and force a civil discourse, an arena where Pelosi believed her decades of experience in legislative maneuvering and decorum would allow her to shine, while Trump would appear out of place, boorish, and unreasonable. It seemed, on the surface, to be the easiest assignment of her storied career. She had been navigating the treacherous currents of Washington, D.C. since 1987. She knew how to command a room with a mere whisper, how to deliver a devastating insult wrapped in the velvet of grandmotherly concern, and how to make cutting remarks sound like ancient, undeniable wisdom. However, what Nancy Pelosi did not know, and what her expensive consultants and extensive network of informants had failed to uncover, was that the man sitting across from her had not spent the last 6 months idly playing golf or posting on social media. While she was rehearsing smiles, Donald Trump had been engaging in a quiet, ruthless operation of intelligence gathering. He had assembled a specialized team of forensic accountants, data scientists, and researchers who had spent half a year combing through the deep archives of the public record. They had secured the declassification of sensitive documents from the Pentagon. They had analyzed thousands of stock trading records. They had cross-referenced congressional testimony with private meeting schedules, and they had mapped communications between the Speaker's office and the corporate boards of companies her husband, Paul Pelosi, had invested in. They had gathered property records, donor lists, and financial disclosure forms dating back 4 decades. They had built a comprehensive database of every legislative vote she had ever cast, and matched it against the fluctuations of her personal wealth. All of this information was not just memorized, it was compiled, organized, visualized, and loaded onto digital drives, ready to be displayed on the gigantic high-definition screen that loomed ominously behind the stage. Pelosi thought she was the prosecutor in this scenario. She believed she was reenacting the dynamic of the impeachments, where she sat in judgment of his conduct. She had absolutely no concept that, for the first time in her life, she was the one on trial. She was about to be exposed as the living embodiment of the very institutional issues she had spent 40 years decrying. A career politician who had entered public service with modest means and somehow, miraculously, amassed a fortune of hundreds of millions of dollars, while her constituents slid further into poverty. Part 2. The Trap is Sprung. The stage was set at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, with a production design meant to evoke a high-end living room featuring warm lighting, intimate seating, and water bottles placed on a small table between them. It looked safe, domestic even. But in reality, it was a panopticon. Cameras were positioned at every conceivable angle, ensuring that for 90 minutes, with no commercial breaks to offer respite, there would be nowhere to hide. Every micro-expression, every bead of sweat, every stammer would be broadcast in ultra-high resolution to an audience of 85 million Americans. James Reed opened the broadcast with a somber, respectful tone. He welcomed the nation, explaining that tonight they were attempting something different, outlining the rules of no podiums, no time limits, just conversation. He introduced the candidates, and to his left sat Donald Trump, the 45th president. Trump was dressed in his customary dark suit and red tie, but his energy was markedly different tonight. He was unusually calm, almost eerily relaxed, neither scowling nor interrupting. He sat comfortably, his posture open, with his phone resting casually on the armrest and a thin, unassuming folder on the table. He looked like a predator who had already trapped its prey and was simply waiting for the hunger to set in. To Reed's right sat Leader Pelosi. She was dressed in her signature bright colors, a sharp purple suit adorned with a gold brooch, projecting power and vitality. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap. She smiled that practiced grandmother smile, the very picture of dignified leadership. The moderator turned to her first, noting her nearly 4 decades of public service and asking what brought her there that night. Pelosi took a small, measured breath, recognizing this as her moment, having rehearsed this opening 50 times. She began by stating that she had dedicated her life to public service, her voice warm and laced with just the right amount of concern. She spoke of fighting for working families, for those without a voice in the halls of power, and for children who deserve a better future. She pivoted smoothly to the theme of unity, glancing at Trump with a look that was subtle but devastatingly clear to her supporters. She spoke of believing in redemption, even in these divided times and with difficult people, implying that those who put their own interests above the country could still learn and grow. The Democratic side of the audience applauded warmly, recognizing the masterclass in passive aggression she had just delivered, taking the moral high ground while clearly implying that the man sitting 5 feet away was a traitor to the nation in need of redemption. Reid then turned to Trump for his thoughts. Trump smiled, but it wasn't his rally smile of all teeth and bombast. It was a smaller, tighter, almost amused expression. He noted softly that he and Nancy had known each other a long time. He acknowledged their disagreements, prompting a ripple of chuckles through the room at the understatement. But then he added that he respected she had been in the game a long time, that she had been very successful and had done very well for herself. The phrase, "done very well for herself," hung in the air for a fraction of a second too long. On the surface, it appeared to be a compliment, but the tone was sharp, knowing, with a hint of an edge that made Pelosi's smile tighten just a millimeter. It was the first warning shot, though she didn't realize it yet. Trump continued, stating that tonight they should talk about real issues affecting real Americans, moving past political games and speeches to the things that actually matter. And so, the trap was set. For the first 20 minutes, the town hall proceeded exactly as Pelosi had hoped, which was exactly how Trump had planned it. They discussed inflation, immigration, and energy policy, and Pelosi fell into her comfortable rhythm. She spoke passionately about the middle class being squeezed and the struggle of ordinary families. She made repeated subtle digs at Trump's inherited wealth, positioning herself as the champion of the common person against the billionaire class. She talked about the need for the wealthy to pay their fair share, all delivered in that reasonable, concerned voice. Trump, for his part, was bafflingly disciplined, refusing to take the bait. When she implied he didn't understand poverty, he didn't lash out about his business empire, but instead cited unemployment numbers. He talked about wage growth data, remaining professional, measured, and calm. To Pelosi, this was confusing. She kept waiting for the explosion, the tangent, the erratic behavior that she could exploit, but it never came. She began to relax, thinking he was perhaps sedated or off his game. She didn't realize that he was deliberately letting her establish her premise, allowing her to claim moral authority as the champion of the poor and the enemy of corruption. He was letting her build the very pedestal he was about to kick out from under her. Part 3. The San Francisco Indictment. The clock ticked to 23 minutes when the moderator, James Reid, gestured to the audience for a question. A young woman stood up, looking to be in her late 20s, nervous but determined. She addressed Leader Pelosi, stating that she lived in San Francisco, having moved there 5 years ago for a tech job. She expressed her love for the city, but noted that it had gotten significantly worse. The room went quiet as she described homeless encampments everywhere, open drug use, human waste on the sidewalks, and car break-ins, adding that her friends were all leaving. She asked, respectfully but directly, why it hadn't gotten better, and why it had gotten so much worse, given Pelosi had represented San Francisco for 37 years. It was a respectful question, but it struck at the absolute weakest point in Pelosi's armor, her own district. San Francisco had become a national symbol of urban decay, a dystopian counter-argument to progressive policies. But Pelosi didn't flinch. She had answered this 1,000 times and launched into her standard defense, calling the issues complex and systemic. She spent 3 minutes weaving a tapestry of blame, pointing fingers at income inequality, billionaires, corporate greed, Republicans in Washington, and pharmaceutical companies. She blamed everyone and everything, except the person who had been the sole congressional representative for the district since 1987. When she finished, there was polite applause from her side of the aisle, but the young woman remained standing, frowning, clearly feeling that the response was a filibuster of excuses rather than an answer. Trump, who had been watching the exchange with the patience of a crocodile, looked up from his phone and asked if he could ask Nancy something. Pelosi turned, surprised. As in all their years of debates, he had never asked permission. He asked her to confirm she had been in Congress since 1987, equating to 37 years representing the same district. He asked casually what her district looked like when she started versus what it looks like now. Pelosi's eyes narrowed, sensing a pivot, but she felt safe on the terrain of governance, dismissing the question as overly simplistic and claiming he wouldn't understand the complexities of urban governance. Trump simply said, "Try me," and tapped his phone 3 times. Behind them, the massive screen suddenly flickered to life. Trump pointed a finger at the screen, declaring it to be the Tenderloin, shot by local news that very week. The images that filled the screen were visceral and horrifying. High-definition footage panned across city blocks, lined entirely with tents. Men and women were slumped over on the sidewalks, needles openly sticking out of their arms. Piles of trash blocked the entrances to boarded-up businesses, and the scene was one of absolute humanitarian despair, raw and undeniable. This wasn't a conservative attack ad. It was footage from San Francisco's own local news stations. The audience fell into a stunned silence, and even the Democrats shifted uncomfortably in their seats, as the images were too graphic and real to ignore. Trump let the video play for a full 30 seconds, an eternity on live television, before tapping his phone again. He announced that the next image was San Francisco in 1987, the year she took office. The screen split. On the right, the dystopian footage of the present continued to roll, while on the left, grainy but colorful archival film appeared. It showed Golden Gate Park filled with picnicking families, clean streets in the financial district, bustling with businessmen, and Fisherman's Wharf packed with happy tourists. It showed children playing in parks without a tent or a needle in sight. The contrast was not just stark, it was violent, a visual indictment of 4 decades of decline. Trump finally spoke, his voice devoid of his usual mockery and sounding almost curious. He cited official city statistics, noting that homelessness in her district was up 400% since she took office. Drug overdose deaths were up 800%, and business closures in the Tenderloin were up 60% in just the last decade. He emphasized that these were reports from her own city, the one she had represented for almost 40 years while claiming to fight for the people. Pelosi opened her mouth to retort, intending to blame national economic trends. But Trump cut her off with more data. He compared her district to Austin, Texas, and Nashville, Tennessee, pointing out that while homelessness had risen there, the percentages were vastly lower than in her district. He stated that her district was unique in its severity. He set his phone down on the table with a soft click and asked what happened, and what she had done for 37 years while her city fell apart. The camera zoomed in tight on Pelosi's face, showing her smile frozen into a mask. She looked like a deer in the headlights, realizing the car bearing down on her wasn't swerving. She attempted to dismiss him, claiming he was oversimplifying complex issues to distract from his own record. Trump's eyebrows shot up, and that amused, dangerous smile returned to his face. He accepted the invitation to talk about corruption, suggesting they start by discussing how she got rich. Part 4. The Financial Anatomy of Power. The silence that followed Trump's invitation to discuss corruption was heavy, suffocating, and pregnant with anticipation. The atmosphere shifted instantly from a political debate to a courtroom cross-examination. The moderator, James Reed, sensing the volatility, attempted to intervene and maintain a respectful tone, but Trump insisted he was being respectful by asking a legitimate question. He turned to the camera, adopting the tone of a narrator explaining a plot twist, and stated that while Pelosi's salary had never exceeded $223,000, her net worth was estimated between $200 and $240 million. He expressed curiosity about how someone on a government salary could amass such wealth. Pelosi was ready for this, having a rehearsed answer prepared about her husband's success as a businessman and investor. Trump nodded slowly, repeating the phrase, "successful investor," before picking up his phone again. The massive screen behind them changed, replacing the decaying streets with a stark, high-contrast graphic timeline. On the left were Paul Pelosi's stock purchases, and on the right were legislative actions, connected by thick red lines. Trump read from the screen, detailing a purchase of Tesla call options in December 2020, followed weeks later by the Biden administration's announcement of an electric vehicle initiative, resulting in a $3.2 million profit. The audience murmured as the timeline told a story of cause and effect. Trump asked if it was a coincidence. His voice mild. Pelosi's smile vanished, and she stated she did not discuss her husband's private investments. Trump ignored the denial and continued, detailing a Microsoft stock purchase in December 2021, followed by a massive Pentagon Cloud Services contract, resulting in a $1.1 million profit. He highlighted a purchase of Disney stock just before COVID relief legislation benefiting the entertainment industry passed, yielding a $1.7 million profit. He pointed to a massive spike involving NVIDIA stock, purchased before Pelosi publicly championed AI regulation favoring established players, resulting in a $5.2 million profit. He listed a purchase of Alphabet stock before Pelosi opposed antitrust legislation, leading to a $2.8 million profit. A summary slide appeared, listing total documented profits from trades made within 30 days of a legislative action. She influenced as $42 million. Trump explained that in the private sector, this is called insider trading, noting her husband's special talent for buying stocks right before market-moving events she knew about. He cited a statistic that her husband's success rate on options trades was 76%, compared to Warren Buffett's 68%, asking what his secret was. The audience was riveted, watching the dismantling of a myth in real time. Pelosi gripped the armrests, calling it a coordinated attack and stating the trades were disclosed public records. Trump seized on this, agreeing that the dates and profits were facts, and simply asked how her husband knew what to buy and when. When the moderator noted the trades were technically legal, Trump pointed out that Pelosi wrote the laws and had opposed every bill to ban congressional stock trading. He asked if the $42 million, the mansions, and the vineyard were the reasons why. He noted the irony of her lecturing billionaires about greed while making millions on stock trades timed with her legislative knowledge. For the first time, Pelosi had no smooth answer, staring at the chart that was impossible to explain away. Sensing blood in the water, Trump signaled for the next phase, asking if she remembered an interview she did in her kitchen during COVID. The screen dissolved to a video clip from April 2020, showing Pelosi in a gleaming, professional-grade kitchen with two massive sub-zero refrigerators. Trump narrated, pointing out the luxury appliances, while she showed off a freezer stocked with designer ice cream. A caption appeared on the screen estimating the cost of the refrigerators at $48,000. Trump reminded the audience that this interview went viral, while 22 million Americans were unemployed. The screen split again, showing Pelosi with her ice cream on the left and the homeless encampment in the Tenderloin on the right, noting the locations were only a 15-minute drive apart. He highlighted the obscene contrast between her luxury and her constituents' squalor. Pelosi tried to fight back, calling it an attack on a successful woman. But Trump countered that he was asking how she became successful, contrasting his private sector risks with her wealth accumulation while in public office. He then moved to her Napa vineyard, noting she bought it in 2008 for $3.5 million, the same year she championed legislation protecting the wine industry. He produced property records showing the purchase timing and the seller, a developer who needed and received zoning changes Pelosi voted for. He noted the vineyard's current $25 million value, a 600% return, and asked how much tax she paid on that appreciation. Cornered, Pelosi lashed out, trying to pivot to January 6th and accusing Trump of inciting an insurrection. Trump smiled, sitting up straighter, and said he was glad she brought that up. Part V. The declassified turning point. He reached into his folder and withdrew official government documents stamped declassified. He reminded her of the narrative that he was responsible for the security failure, then revealed a memo from the Department of Defense dated January 3, 2021, offering 10,000 National Guard troops. He read the text aloud, showing the offer was made 3 days in advance. He then displayed her office's response, declining the troops due to concerns about optics. He repeated the word optics, accusing her of rejecting safety because of how it would look on TV, and then blaming him when the security she was responsible for failed. Pelosi stammered that it was out of context, but Trump slammed his hand lightly on the table, asserting that he offered protection, and she rejected it. He then turned to the January 6th committee, accusing her of handpicking the members and suppressing evidence. He showed video footage of protesters being waved into the Capitol by police, footage he claimed her committee deleted. He displayed phone records showing coordination with media outlets and cited testimony from security officials that was suppressed. He accused her of running a show trial to cover up her own security failures. The studio was dead silent. Trump then summarized the night's revelations: the decay of her district, her massive wealth accumulation through timed stock trades, her lifestyle contrast during the pandemic, and her rejection of security for the Capitol. He looked directly at her, stating that everything she accused him of corruption, self-dealing, rigging the system she had provably done. He called it projection. The reaction in the room was instantaneous, with gasps rippling through the audience as they witnessed the evidence-based dismantling of a political titan. Trump leaned forward for the final blow, contrasting his private sector career with her accumulation of wealth on a government salary while representing a poor district. He asked the simple question: between the two of them, who is actually corrupt? The silence was absolute. Pelosi, stripped of her authority, stammered that it was character assassination, but Trump interrupted, calling it facts. He showed one last chart, correlating her top campaign donors with her husband's stock trades, suggesting a pay-to-play scheme. Pelosi had nothing to say. Part VI's: the fallout and the verdict. The remaining 43 minutes were a slow-motion funeral for a career. Pelosi gave short, hollow answers, looking diminished. When the town hall ended, she left immediately without shaking hands, while Trump stayed to greet the audience. The aftermath was bedlam. The clips went viral instantly, with millions of views for the stock trading timeline and the projection moment. Conservative media celebrated. But the liberal media could not spin the documents. Fact checks acknowledged the accuracy of the claims. Social media was brutal, and ethics complaints were filed. A grassroots movement emerged in San Francisco, and a bill to ban congressional stock trading rapidly gained support, forcing Pelosi to vote for it. Her approval ratings plummeted. An investigation into the Vineyard purchase began, and HBO announced a documentary. 3 months later, Pelosi announced she would not seek leadership positions. 2 weeks after that, Katie Morrison, a local attorney, announced a primary challenge that devastated Pelosi's standing. 6 months later, Pelosi announced she would not seek re-election. Nancy Pelosi's career ended not with a dramatic scandal, but with a quiet retirement forced by the exposure of facts. 1 year later, Trump, in an interview, denied destroying her, stating she destroyed herself through 40 years of corruption that she thought would go unnoticed. He emphasized that receipts always matter. The town hall became a case study in business and law schools, and Pelosi's legacy was rewritten to include the scandals and the contrast between her wealth and her district's poverty. The Queen had fallen, not to a slur, but to her own documented record, watched by 85 million people in real time.